So I think we will go to the technical session of the program. The theme of today's presentation or a technical discussion is Forests for Water, Fostering Prosperity and Peace. And we have a good lineup of speakers. I will introduce them when they come. To give an opening remarks, I think I have given enough information during my presidential address. But then when it comes to the theme of World Water Day, Water for Peace, I wanted to give you two incidences which I was involved in. One was a situation in Andhra Pradesh where one village in the 70s, they were growing sugarcane. And you know, when farmers are growing sugarcane, it's an indication that there is an abundant amount of water. Otherwise, you won't be able to grow sugarcane. But fortunately or unfortunately, during 70s and 80s, there were a lot of funds given for constructing tube wells, probably because of the Green Revolution. All these farmers went and constructed tube wells in the village, and they started exploiting the groundwater continuously, and it was giving more water, so they were getting more crops, and they were really happy about it. But when it came to 90s, from 70s to 90s, they had to resort to only growing groundnut. So the transition from sugarcane to groundnut, and groundnut is the most water resistant crop, where you can grow groundnut with less amount of water. So they were growing 20 years back the sugarcane, and they had to resort to, and it was a pure mismanagement of water. They had abundant amount of groundwater reserve at the beginning. They utilized it completely, and then they were running short of water. In the 2013, Rural Department of Government of India came up with a suggestion to rejuvenate. So what was happening there is, after the 90s, when they were resorting to groundnut, all the farmers started fleeing from the village. The village was not having any habitats, or very, very few habitats there, or very few people staying there. The young people did not want to take up any agriculture anymore, and then the village was drying up, and it became a deserted kind of area. So in 2013, Government of India had intervened. They wanted to rejuvenate it, and IIT Madras, when I was in the team, IIT Madras was involved in that. Then we went to the village, did some survey, and started certain interventions. The rainfall pattern has clearly changed, and developed some interventions. And now, people who have migrated from villages started coming back because of the water availability. The point here is, water is one of the sources which keeps every people united. And if you don't have water, you will flee away. And that is what I think Dr. Krishnakumar also mentioned in the beginning. The second incident is, again in one of the villages in Andhra Pradesh, where all the tube wells got dried, and in the village there were only 3 wells which was yielding, 3 tube wells which were yielding, and there were conflicts, and it's not a war, but then there were fighting between the neighbors for demand for water for their own utilization and for agricultural purposes and all. So there also we could intervene through a project from Government of India. So what we suggested is, we will connect the entire village through pipe to water supply, not only for drinking water, but also for irrigation. The condition we put forth was, when you grow crops in your area where the source of water is not in your area, the profit which you are getting should be shared with the person who is actually supplying water to you. And this was through people's participation, and they could grow whatever crops they wanted to grow, and that is how, even now it is running very smooth without any problem. So water can also eliminate conflicts and fights between the neighbors. Now we are going to face, soon or later we are going to face the conflict for water between the countries. I think there is already a saying the next world war will be based on water. But I don't think it is going to happen, but then I don't want that to happen as well. But the direction in which we are all going leads to that kind of a situation. So I don't want to add any more. There are exciting talks to be, or experiences to be shared by several people. The first talk will be by Dr. Sumit Sen, followed by I guess it will be Dr. Pramod Krishnan and Dr. James, who will give their experiences. Then we will be having a panel discussion at the end of it, which will be the conclusion of today's program in complete. Dr. Sumit Sen, I think Sudheer has introduced him. He is a professor at the Department of Hydrology and IIT Roorkee, and also the head of the Center of Excellence in Disaster Management at IIT Roorkee. And he is a program lead for research in Australia India Water Centre. He did his BTech in Agricultural Engineering from Allahabad Agriculture University, or now called as Allahabad Agriculture Institute of Deemed University. It used to be Allahabad Agriculture Institute earlier. He did his masters from University of Arkansas, USA, in again biological and agricultural engineering, and obtained his PhD from Auburn University, USA, in civil engineering. I know personally Sumit for quite some time, I think since 2005, and he has been an established researcher in the field of water management, hydrology, specifically for spring hydrology. He has been a consultant to Department of Science and Technology for developing strategies for conserving spring and spring watersheds, or they call it as spring sheds. And he has developed a document which is a guideline developed by the DST for spring shed management. So the concept is a little different from watershed management, because the springs are small units where you get water from. And his experiences in rainfall runoff modeling, then runoff generation mechanism, hill slope hydrology, and in fact Sumit and I had a project together to work on spring water management, which was funded by the Ministry of Education, Government of India. So I think that gives him more than his expertise what is required, and I request Sumit to present.
Thank you the organizers for inviting me. So I'll not take much time. I'll try to jump on to what I really want to share with you all, especially the young generation, the students from Thrissur Engineering College. So as everyone has mentioned that the water is important, and it's a resource coming out from forest. And I think that's what I thought of sharing with you all, what my research group has been focusing on, how vital the role of forest hydrology plays towards sustaining water resources. So moving on, I will not touch a lot in this part. So as pretty much everyone talked about, the UN started the World Water Day in 1993, focused mainly on the availability and sustainability management. And they developed, as a lot of students might know, they have 17 goals. Out of that, basically the sixth one is the clean water and sanitation, which is important for the local people, right? But other the SDG goals, and one of them is the 15th goal, which is more focused on life on land. It's a terrestrial system, ecosystem, right? So how does that connects to it? So basically what we're talking about now is the forests which are on the land. How does that connect in the overall water cycle? And what type of ecosystem services are land, and especially our area of focus is the forest. How does that ecosystem services going back to the community for the clean water and the local community? So that is the focus of things. When you go a little bit in detail of it, you see that The sixth goal, which is the clean water and sanitation, it talks about the SDG, the focus on that. By 2030, we would like to protect and restore those water resources or the ecosystems. That includes mountain, forest, wetlands, and rivers and aquifers, right? But if you go into detail of 15th SDG goal, I just focus on two of them, is mainly that by 2030, we would like to conserve, restoration and sustained use of these terrestrial ecosystem. And if you go a little bit on more detail in 15.2, part of the 15th goal is that it promotes implementation. So what you heard from all the more experienced person before me, so they are talking about with their experiences in terms of implementation. So you heard why it is important for and how does the implementation, the stories come up, how the government schemes have been implemented, right? I would like to take it to you to a little different tone, and that's, as a researcher, that's what my aim is normally, that to excite the new and young generations towards what needs to be done, right? The government has to implement for this sustained management or sustainable management of this ecosystem, but who will do it? They will manage, or they can implement. But for implementation, we need to have understanding of those ecosystems. So in this case, I focused, and I will be sharing what this forest hydrology means. What are the things which we as a young generation, as a researchers, can learn and can go more into detail. And the forest hydrology, basically it links the forest ecosystem and the hydrology. How does hydrology affects the forest, the effects of forest on the hydrology component? Be it the water cycle, a lot of people talked about, okay, quantity, quality, soil erosion, your microclimate. So I'm going to focus, like, how does the forest, when it changes or it is a different from one forest to another forest. In Kerala also, we have different forest areas or the climatological zones we have, right? How does that affect the microclimatology? How does that affect the small water cycle within the system? And how does that affect the management of the system in terms of soil erosion or the quality of water which is coming out of the system? And you started talking about 1993, right? But before that, so I just want to also connect, and when I was making notes from other speakers, I was also seeing the linkage, what I am going to bring and share with you. So Kerala is also very much well surplus water supply system. And in Himalayas, where I'm going to share with my experiences, it's very well water supplied, very well water supply system. We have enough water or rainfall. But there are instances where we do have water scarcity, and this is what have been focused on. Okay, we need to focus on water scarcity, or else we will be losing a piece. And the UN started in 1993. We talk about our community in Himalayas is 1970s. There was a movement of Chipko movement where the local community does not want to get the forest cut down or towards the development. So there was a conservation thing going on. 1992, we have a UN body, basically they came together, which focused on the sustainable development, so that the local, we will have healthy forest, and so that the poorest will have water. So water for all. So that's the motive, right? So 1970s, 1992. Do anyone can connect? How does it what happened in 2023 IPL? In 2023, there is a monetization happened. If you think about, and I don't know how many people followed, in IPL, every dot ball was again being sponsored that there will be 500 saplings to be planted. And it was of the order of 139,000 saplings were planted for around 278 dot balls. So what we see here is conservation, sustainable development, and some economics coming into that. What Professor Sudheer just mentioned about the upstream, downstream concept of payment for ecosystem. People who's conserving the system are supposed to be paid and supported by the downstream people who are getting benefited. And that is what the ecosystem services is basically talks about. It is a service, the service provided by a particular ecosystem for the humans. And how do we really link that to the conservation, the sustainable development, and the environmental economics coming into together? It's not a one-person job or as a one society or one streams work. It is a lot of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary work needs to be worked on. So when we talk about ecosystem services, especially focusing on the forest, so we can focus on many things. We can focus on hydrology, that's my area of work, resource, ecology, amenities, social. So there will be students who are much interested not in hydrology. I don't want to work in hydrology, let's say, but I am more interested into the social side. Okay, how does this community basically been benefited? So that is a lot of work needs to be done to understand what, when each resource basically can again connect to how does the hydrology or the forest hydrology focus on water availability, soil protection. You go to add the complexity, keep adding it, and you will have a huge amount of system to understand and to work on. There is n number of questions to be still try to be answered in different ecosystems. Just take the forest part of it and you can link it up to different. So what I have focused on in my research is the forest hydrology. How does that focus the hydrology into the soil protection? Soil plays a bigger, very small, strong role in soil in the forest hydrology. How does water move into the system? So that basically affects the runoff generation. Then the another layer comes in, okay, what is the amount of water is going to come from different types of forest? What is the role of partitioning or the interaction between the vegetation and the water which is moving through these systems? So the eco-hydrology comes into picture. And then the local climatology which is being affected by the local forest and the change in the forest on the local climatology. And not my area of interest, but a lot of people work on the quality part of it. So I'm going to share you what I have been working in the two types of dominant forest in Himalayas. One is the pine forest and one is the oak forest, or biologists for Pinus rubicosia, and then the curious Trichopora. So we focus on these two types, and they are basically located at different altitude. We focus on these two, and both the forests have their own ecosystem services. It's not that one is good or one is bad, but their services are different. So you talk about pine forest. So pine forests are very fire resistant, but also has a strong, it has the forest prone also, because you have a very dry systems in those pine systems. But it also gives a lot of income to the local forest department, because we have a lot of good wood coming out of it, resins coming out of it, the pine needles can be utilized for bioproducts out of it. Huge amount of economy is coming out from the pine side. But it also regulates the nutrient in the soil system. It also stabilizes the local hill slopes. So the systems which are steep in Himalayas, because pine does not need a lot of big soil, thick layer for it to sustain. It can sustain on a very thin soil layer. It can stabilize those systems. So there are ecosystem services. Oaks are native. They have been called as green gold of Himalayas because it supplies a lot of good water. Wherever the oak systems are there, you have a good water sources nearby, because it has a high water holding capacity. So again, soils comes into picture. So there are ecosystem services and for each the forest. When we see it on a pan-Himalayan region, and especially from the northwest Himalayas, pine covers around 15% of the forest cover in this region, and oak are of the order of 5 to 6%. But those are the major two species which normally is present in the mid-Himalayan region. But still there is a need of the different questions and the knowledge gaps, which I really want to at least start the thinking process in the new generation, maybe the master student or PhD student, just to start thinking, okay, what different type of question we can answer in our forest cover in Kerala system. Both are water supplies. It's good, but still there are times. So there is still a knowledge gap in there. So the type of runoff generation, because it depends upon the type of soil we have, You have a very, KFRF have very good, nice soil museum. And when you see it, you have a very different soil types you have within this different ecosystem in Kerala, in different forests. So that is going to cover what is the type of runoff generation is going to happen. What is the water budgeting which is going to happen in those type of forests? That's not known. At least in the Himalayan system, we do not know the number. Okay, what is the rainfall partitioning happening into the runoff of that particular forest cover? We do not know exactly the productivity of ecosystem in terms of pine and forest, which is mainly talking about the carbon sequestration, which some of our previous speaker also talked about. Okay, so we have carbon sequestration happening for different forests. How much it is for pine and forest or the oak system, we do not know. We do not have actual number from the field, because that helps to see the impact of the climate change which is going to happen and which is happening, especially in our vulnerable area. Himalayas are very vulnerable to climate change. Also the coastal or the Kerala type of system is also having a very vulnerable. So what is that impact overall onto the forest hydrology? Conventionally in Himalayas, we know that oak is better than pine because people like water, people need water, and wherever you have an oak forest, you have water, but still we need to demystify this. Does this water, oak forest generates water, or oak forest is established or normally gets established near water sources? We do not know. Still there is a question to be answered. Or another part is, pine is spreading in the main Himalayan region. The tree line is moving, the pine is spreading a lot. It's overtaking the oak forest. So pine and oak are competing within the system, and how does that is going to impact the overall in the long term? So for that, we basically took a watershed in Uttarakhand. This is the Kosi River, which basically eventually goes into Ganga River basin. So this is a typical broad side, but this is the soils. We have only majorly two types of soil. What this graph is want to focus on, someone again talked about water crisis comes into the picture in a limelight when it is a lean season, right? When you have enough rainfall, monsoon, people don't really talk about it. Someone said, after today, maybe tomorrow we might not talk about water, right? And it hits when the lean season comes. And this is the data of Kosi River, which is a lean season lean annual water discharge in a river, is going drastically down in that region, which is one of the main water supply for the Almora city of that region. It's a big city. So it is important to learn. So what we did is we took small catchments of pine and oak systems to understand what is the water budgeting, what is the runoff partitioning. So what we did is we did a couple of experiments in runoff plot scale studies. We did it at a watershed scale study. So what you see here is basically the plots and the leachate collection to see how much leachate is happening in the typical pine forest and oak forest. Soil moisture sensors at different depths, just to understand how the water is moving in the pine and oak forest system. And then what you see here is the mini disk for the infiltration. What you see here is the huge difference of the pine has a surface infiltration rate is of the order of 8 mm per hour, but in the oak what you have is only around 2 mm per hour. There's a huge difference between the water sucking power of the soil in pine and oak system. And how does that reflect onto the overall water budgeting will be interesting. Not only that, we did the hydrology part, we also have the sap flow sensors in the pine forest and then the oak forest. What we saw is for that we used the Granier sensors to get the sap flux movement in the trees. How does that link to the transpiration rate? What is the transpiration rate of the pine and oak system? That's the idea going. Not only that, we took how much the canopy, someone talked about the canopy, right? Different forests will have different canopy. When a rain occurs, there is a huge difference of the interception happening. We do not have those numbers. So canopy interception, for that we developed our own system that is very well established. It's a trough under the canopy as a through fall, the water comes through, and through the collar of the stem, how does the water comes through the stem flow. So there is only 3 partitioning: through fall, stem flow, and overall intersection, which is happening with the partition of the rainfall, which is happening. Did that. Along with that, the other partners also developed the flux towers. People talked about the carbon fluxes. So carbon, what is the carbon and water flux is happening in the pine and oak forest? So this is a pine forest. It's a 15-meter tower, because normally the flux towers have to be above the canopy so that you know and understand what is the flux movement from the bottom below the canopy towards the above the canopy. Then we have the oak system. Just quickly going to the result, just a very brief idea what we learned. So we studied runoff at the plot scale, watershed scale, canopy at a stand scale system on the tree, and the flux towers at a larger region. So what you're seeing here is the soil moisture movement in a pine system at different depths. So what you see here actually is there is a huge amount of water which is moving. The moisture is moving fast. Moisture is not holding the soil part of the pine system. But in oak system, the water moisture stays quite a bit of high system. That clearly shows that in the pine or oak system, the water holding capacity of the soil is very, very high. We link those events for last 1.5 years, especially the monsoon season, the couple of events. What you see here is in the pine system and the oak system, water moves through the soil profile, number of events, how it is responding. But when you see the oak part, sometimes it's not. So not all the depths are responding to the water movement. So that is what we will convert that into the part of how it is happening. So what you see here on the x-axis is the soil moisture in the system. ASI is nothing but the antecedent soil moisture index plus the precipitation which has happened and the runoff which generates. We can really clearly see that in pine system, the threshold of water or runoff to be generated is quicker. The system is wet on the top layer and it will generate the runoff. But in the oak system, that threshold is around 120 mm, which is it can absorb more water into the system, and the runoff is going to generate little later. That's a runoff plot study. Then we said, okay, what is happening at the plant scale study, the stand scale, the sap index, the sap flow. What you see here is a 24-hour data. It is not been published, so we have kept it under just a one slide only. So idea is basically to see the pine has a higher sap flux density, which is taking a lot of water in from the system, which is of around 0 to 20 milliliter per centimeter per minute density. But the oak has very, very limited, so it takes the water. So what it tells is basically when you take that density and multiply with the sap area of that wood, the trunk, you can convert that into the transpiration rate. And what you see here is the transpiration rate of the pine is of the order of 70 mm per day. But what you see here is 30. So the huge difference between the pine and the oak system, the transpiration rate. That means the pine is taking a lot of water and it's sustained. What you see here, the third panel is again interesting. Nothing is pretty much clear here because it's a monsoon season. That panel is from the monsoon, so it is June to August. The system behaves very, very different. There will be seasonal variability as compared to the where you collecting the data. The data collection timing is also very, very important. We took that data. We also take the rainfall and runoff data from the watershed scale of pine. What you are seeing here again, with that throughfall, which we put it under the canopy. What you see here is the throughfall data, the total throughfall and stem flow. How much water is coming through this canopy? Is interception losses are 32 to 33% in pine and oak, which is little higher what has been basically been reported recently from Brunzeel, which is a faculty and a researcher in forest hydrology from Netherlands. Is a retired faculty, very well established. What you see here is a very good trend, a clear-cut idea that there's a huge amount of interception is happening in this canopy, which we normally as a hydrology we don't take it. What is that reflected? It's a heavy file. I'm just going to show you that. You have precipitation happening. that is from January to December. You have pine forest runoff, which is happening from the plot, from the watershed scale. This is at the watershed scale, water yield, in mm, percentage of the annual. So what you see here, the rainfall is happening. This is the monsoon time in Himalayas. Very, very small amount of runoff is coming from the pine system because it's taking a lot of water, infiltrating it, right? What happened? Interesting, just to see there. October, almost after the monsoon, the pine has stored a lot of water, slowly and slowly. It's not responding too much on the peak part. Oaks were holding and releasing also quickly. But when the soil layers in the pine system get a lot of water, that it flushes out in October. And that is what is basically shown up here at the later part of the year. And it is currently also is the same thing happening. So you do not see a lot of water in the base flow condition in the pine, but eventually after one threshold, the water starts flowing in the system. So that is a very, very different and a new data sets coming in. Very quickly, to cover the carbon fluxes, what you see here is the NEE, which is net carbon ecosystem exchange. NEE, net ecosystem exchange. More the negative value, more the carbon sequestration is happening. The darker block is basically your pine and the lighter gray is oak. So clearly sees that pine is taking a lot of carbon sequestering into the soil profile. Same thing with the gross productivity, the pine is basically more. So good, right? But in the terms of water fluxes, pine is also taking a lot of water into the transpiration system. So thinking about, so there is a trade-off. Now, if we are about to basically release this as a policy brief from this project to the Forest Department for Himalayas, for Uttarakhand. So now it's a trade-off. How does the policy people, like especially for the people senior who are sitting here, how does they take it and implement it, right? So there is a trade-off of pine forest, which is taking a lot of water, but they are also sequestering a lot of carbon. How do we make these things in a way that it can be implemented? That's another question to be answered. We did not stop there, so there is a sequestration happening. What is the role of that sequestration with the rainfall which is happening? So what you see here on this graph is the net exchange happening with the amount of rainfall. What you see a clear-cut threshold again coming out, that for pine, the 10 mm of rainfall is the place where you have a highest sequestration happening. For oak, it is of the order of 17 mm rainfall, which is the highest. Now, linking it to the, does it matter when it is happening or it is after? So particular rainfall, after a particular rainfall, it is the highest sequestration is happening 1 or 2 days later. That means water goes into the soil system, it's available for the roots to grow and sequester, right? So it's basically for pine and for oak. Both after 2 days of the maximum rainfall, the sequestration values were highest. We did not stop there. So the last part of it, so how does that affect the climate? The climate is affecting the forest part. So what we did is some sort of a SWOT simulation. It is still working on it. We set up a SWOT model for the POSI system. This is the SSP, the latest Sumit 6, the reanalysis data sets for SSP 245 and 585. Both of them basically shows there is an increase in the temperature minimum maximum, and we have temperature variation going on. Idea is to see basically how does the ET component is basically very, very high, of the order of 44 to 45% of the whole ecosystem. And in the SSP, the moderate system scenario, we have water which is current baseline is 331 mm coming out of the system. It has little reduced in the SSP. Increase in that and then again reduce in the SSP 245 scenario. But under the highest scenario is like it has reduced. So the climate is eventually going to increase drier lean season flows in the Kosi watershed. That is what we, so the overall summary just to quickly add is we saw that the pine in the forest, oak forest, have a very clear-cut higher thresholds for the water conservation. Pine systems have shown quick, slowest response to the rainfall, but very high peaks in the later part. And the warming climates under the SSP scenarios, the Kosi watershed in Himalaya is going to see again the drier. So the management comes into the picture. What type of management implementation can be done? So this is our learning, but just to give you all again a second thought for me also. Last slide. We learned, we shared. What's next? As a field hydrologist, when I speak of myself, okay, I like to go and do field work. But what's next? So what we are looking is, and you guys help, is basically advancing our predictive accuracy. We still are struggling to get good, accurate data sets and results. We have to move from the observational to the theory to the enhanced hydrological predictions. Predictions are still have a lot of uncertainties. So that is something to ponder on, to take it out. We talk about modelings and analysis. We still say, okay, 0.8, R square, NSC, kg values, good, right? We have to move a little on a higher note, maybe 0.9. That's our standard has to go up. That you guys have to see, okay? You should not be happy with the R square value of 0.5 or 0.6. You have to go up on that. We have done a lot of studies in different parts at small scales, right? How does that can regional models, so people are talking about model of models, linking different type of models. So we have been talking about Himalayas are really facing forest fires, a huge amount every time, every year. Also in the Kerala side also we see forest fires here, right? How does this forest fire model can link to the hydrological model, can work for a regional scale? That is the need of our. That is the need of an hour. Okay, we have done enough. We have understood. Okay, now what? We have to make it a regionalized so that the model can integrate and work for a larger society and knowledge information. That is something, a challenge for all of us. One thing and the last thing, which I speak every time, is ET, that is evapotranspiration. We normally, as a hydrologist, as a water balance person, we say ET is a loss. I think we have to start thinking that ET is not a loss. ET is a water source for other nearby region. Water which is going onto the cloud is basically a source for the outside. I think with this final note, I would like to say thank you and thanks a lot. Yes. Before I acknowledge, so before I start, sorry, Dr. Sudheer. So this work has been a part of a multi-consortium institutional work. So the PI is Dr. Sandeepan Mukherjee from Almora Institute. And I was telling Dr. James that, Dr. James have basically taught Denzel. Denzel is one of my PhD students who's working on this project from the hydrology side of it. And he has been taught by Dr. James when he was doing BTech in his tenure in Tamil Nadu, some of the engineering college. Thank you very much.